Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on News X World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pleads not guilty to U.S. narcotics charges in a New York court. This comes after his capture under U.S. President Donald Trump. Delcy Rodriguez has been sworn in as Venezuela's interim president after the capture of Maduro. Addressing the National Assembly, Rodriguez has condemned the attack and vowed to restore peace, stability, and national unity. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls for respect for national sovereignty after the U.S. military operations in Venezuela. He warns of rising instability, regional fallout, and dangerous precedents in international relations. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen has called for renewed talks with the United States. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump again suggested annexing the Arctic territory. Jordan and the European Union will hold their first ever bilateral summit on Thursday, bringing together Jordanian King Abdullah with European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The landmark meeting builds on the January 2025 Strategic and Comprehensive Partnership. German embassy chargé d'affaires Clemens Hatch and Syria's Minister of Economy and Industry Nidal al-Shar met in Damascus to discuss expanding cooperation in industry, trade, and investment. The talks aim to strengthen economic ties and attract foreign investment as Damascus seeks to revive key sectors amid reconstruction efforts. Western Japan was struck by a powerful 6.2 magnitude earthquake. Authorities issued no tsunami warning and reported no major damage, though strong shaking was felt across parts of Shimane Prefecture. NVIDIA unveils its new AI chip platform, Vera Rubin, at CES in Las Vegas. This move aims to maintain dominance in the global AI center market. Now we start this hour with Venezuela, when Maduro's lawmaker son has addressed the Venezuelan Legislature Assembly, stating that if they normalize the kidnapping of a head of state, no country is safe in the world. Maduro's son has also offered his support for the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, who has been ordered by the Supreme Court to assume the presidency in an acting capacity. Meanwhile, Jorge Rodriguez has been appointed as the president of Venezuela's National Assembly, who has promised to explore all possible ways to bring back Nicolas Maduro to Venezuela. New members of Venezuela's single-chamber parliament were chosen last May in elections boycotted by much of the opposition, leaving 256 of the 286 seats in the hands of the ruling United Socialist Party of Venezuela and its allies. Let's listen into what the lawmaker son of Maduro has shared.
Del país, ellos volverán. Nuestros ojos lo verán. Seremos testigos de ese momento histórico. No tengan dudas que eso va a pasar. En el nombre de Dios Todopoderoso, se lo pedimos y lo va a cumplir. Amén. A ti, Delcy, Eloína, mi apoyo incondicional a la tarea tan dura que te toca. Cuenta conmigo, cuenta con mi familia, cuenta con nuestra firmeza para tomar los pasos correctos al frente de esta responsabilidad que hoy te toca, y estamos firmes en unidad absoluta para lograr los objetivos de la paz en Venezuela, de sacar al país adelante y que regresen Nicolás y Cilia. Y a ti, papá, te digo, hiciste de todos nosotros en la familia gente fuerte. Aquí estamos, cumpliendo hasta que regrese. La patria está en buenas manos, papá. Y pronto nos vamos a abrazar aquí en Venezuela. Y vas a ver a los muchachos, Cilia. Los vas a ver, Cilia. Nos vamos a ver. Que viva Venezuela, que viva la patria. Y aquí estamos firmes para lo que tengamos que hacer por nuestra patria. Los amamos mucho. Muchas gracias.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Asta Chadha. She's an Associate Professor of International Relations, joins us live of Ritsumeikan University, joins us live from Kyoto. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us once again. I hope you're staying safe out there because of the earthquake. Now, looking at our discussion once again, now that we have seen Nicolas Venezuelan people or the Venezuelan Maduro's son address Venezuelan people and him claiming that they'll do anything to bring back Nicolas Maduro, do they realistically have any chances, or when they say bring back Maduro, what channels do they have?
Thank you, Asuma, for for welcoming me. And yes, I'm safe. We're all safe here in Kyoto. Well, I mean, the stakes are very high for Venezuelan politicians, for people who were in support of Maduro. And I mean, if you look at the people in charge right now in Venezuela, they're all the same people who were from the inner circle of Maduro's government. And his son is basically hinting at three courses of action here. One, they want to instate confidence in their public about the present administration that has taken over the reins from Nicolas Maduro and his wife in their absence, of course, referring to Delcy Rodriguez and her brother, who's now in charge of the assembly. So it's the family and the inner circle that is governing in absence and wants to show that their institutions are still quite secure. That was one message. The second message he's trying to send out is that they still have hope. That is very, very questionable, because unless it's US that does pardon Maduro and sends him back, it is very unlikely that they will see the return of Nicolas Maduro that promptly, as they are stating. Neither do they have the defense capabilities. At this point, they don't even have good cards on the negotiating table. So it seems very, very unlikely. But probably it's the third aspect that's more important, which is his son, Maduro Guerra. He was trying to, stimulate emotions in public. And at some point, he also mentioned during the speech that you just played in Spanish, he seemed to be addressing people and telling them that, we would want people to mobilize and, protest this or show some support for Maduro and come to the streets and occupy the streets. It doesn't seem to be happening that way. We do see protests happening, but that is largely because of US intervention and the manner of that intervention, but not so much for Maduro's administration or Maduro-led, Venezuela being the dream of any of the people. So it seems very, very unlikely, in short, that Nicolas Maduro is going to be seen back in his domestic politics unless, two of the things happen. Either these people are able to, Venezuelans are able to negotiate, and their people in power have something to give to the United States that they would need more than Nicolas Maduro at this point, which seems unlikely because he was the main person for extraction during the entire operation. And second, unless he gets pardoned in the US, which also feels very unlikely given the kind of very serious charges against him. And let's not forget that the US had declared him almost, like the head of a running narco-terrorist organization. So it's not that easy. They are probably doing that for domestic political consumption and to stir some amount of confidence in the people, but it is extremely unlikely.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. And like you rightfully mentioned, that the US has characterized him as a threat, Maduro as a threat, and also now US has characterized this latest operation of taking Maduro as law enforcement action. How do you think how will US justify their action?
I mean, see, my answer would have been slightly different had it not been the Trump administration. But under the current administration, seems like for them, the severity of narco-terrorism and the framing of the whole issue as a severe threat to American security is justified enough for them to have carried out this operation. And in their strategic thinking, they are looking at, they are re-invoking in some way a new version of Monroe Doctrine and trying to say that, America's back in its strategic backyard and it wants to secure it, and it will employ any amount of capabilities to the best of their possibilities in order to ensure that US interests are secured. not just around the United States, but we are looking at this power projection happening beyond. Because I'm again referring to President Trump and his administration when they say that they are looking at the possibilities of complete erosion or destruction of narco-terrorism across. We're talking about Cuba, we're talking about Colombia, Mexico. They went even as far as Iran to say that unless protesters, if any more protesters get hurt, Iran might see U.S. action. So they are clearly projecting their power beyond the usual surrounding states of United States. So given that sort of environment, it feels very, very unlikely that we are going to see a lot of stability. US is no longer shy of projecting that power. I mean, they have never been shy, but looks like under this administration, the kind of operation that was conducted and the amount of meticulous planning that it took for 6 months, including intelligence, their armed forces, all the best of their minds coming together to make sure that this was executed with complete precision, seems to be well thought out, and doesn't look like US is going to roll it back. On the contrary, I mean, we don't know how credible this is, but the US has actually threatened Venezuela with a second strike if they do not bow down, right? Yeah. That's one. Two, it is still very, very questionable as to what US has in mind when it says that it wants to run Venezuela. Yes. So we don't know in terms of justification, are they trying to hint at a democratic transition? Are they trying to look at maybe holding elections? Are they going to recognize this legitimate government currently in Venezuela as illegitimate? Because President Trump has clearly said they are on one hand talking to Delcy Rodriguez, and on the other hand, they don't want to recognize them as legitimate government either. So we don't know which way US is going. And number three, when US says we want to keep the oil running, we don't know what they mean. I mean, are American companies in the current environment of instability, are they willing to make the investments in Venezuela? And what is the guarantee after this administration that things are, I mean, let's say Trump administration is able to bring about some interim stability, what about after that? Because investments are not that easy to pull out once they are made. So, there is too much uncertainty. I do not think United States is looking forward to being answerable or accountable at this point to the international community. They thought something was a security threat and they addressed it. And I mean, that's all we're going to hear from the United States unless there is a second course of action that they want to take.
Yes, thank you for highlighting all of that. Dr. Chadda, please stay with us as we come back to you. Now, strong condemnation has been issued by China and Russia at the UN Security Council following the US military operation in Venezuela. The U.S. action, which resulted in the detention of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, has been condemned by China and Russia as the violation of Venezuela's sovereignty and of international law. Meanwhile, China has called for the immediate release of Maduro and his wife, urging Washington to respect international law, cease coercive actions, and resolve disputes through dialogue, whereas Russia has warned the operation marks a dangerous return to lawlessness and called the assault an act of armed aggression aimed at controlling Venezuela's resources. Both countries have emphasized that conflicts must be addressed through diplomatic means and that unilateral military actions threaten peace and stability across Latin America and the Caribbean. Let's listen in.
Для преступления, цинично совершенного Соединенными Штатами в Каракасе, нет и не может быть никаких оправданий. Решительно осуждаем акт вооруженной агрессии Соединенных Штатов против Венесуэлы в нарушении всех международно-правовых норм. В связи с подтвержденными сведениями о нахождении похищенного президента Венесуэлы Николаса Мадуро и его супруги в США, а с сегодняшнего дня, как мы знаем, в Нью-Йорке, призываем американское руководство немедленно освободить законно избранного президента независимого государства и его супругу. Поэтому невнятное бормотание и попытки уйти от принципиальных оценок со стороны тех, кто в иных ситуациях с пеной у рта требовал от других соблюдения устава ООН, сегодня выглядит особенно лицемерным и неуместным.
中方对美方的单边非法霸凌行径深表震惊，予以强烈谴责。我们呼吁美方确保马杜罗总统和夫人的人身安全，将他们立即释放。我们支持安理会履行维护国际和平与安全的 首要责任，支持联合国秘书长、地区国家和组织一切有助于推动对话和局势降级的努力。
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Asta Chadha from Kyoto, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for staying with us. You know, as you just highlighted what the scenarios that could take place, but no matter what, U.S. is unlikely to roll back their stance and also what they have done. So what impact could this strong opposition from China and Russia have on U.S. and also the Security Council's unity and UN's ability to manage the situation and also escalation?
Well, I mean, interesting times, isn't it,
Yes.
to see countries like China and Russia, reiterating that we need to safeguard international law and rule-based international order. I
Yes.
mean, put me in a bit of a surprise when I heard those statements, but not, I mean, really, if I look down to their primary concerns and their own strategic interests, it doesn't look that surprising to me. And the reason for that, I'll give you several. One, I mean, United Nations as an international platform or UN Security Council has consistently, persistently failed to deter any conflict. And UN does remain a good consultative mechanism, does remain a good platform to raise concerns, but not enough to solve anything or even bring parties to the negotiating table. So I do not see only the fact that these countries are raising this issue at UN Security Council and trying to show some solidarity. I do not think that being able to translate into any action or any responsible sort of accountable sort of response from United States. It's very unlikely. And also because US along with China and Russia are all three veto powers there in the United Nations. So it's very unlikely again. I mean, who is going to vote against who for what? And that brings me to, the focus on why is it that China and Russia are so concerned about the US actions, right? I mean, China's primary concern is very, very clear. They are looking at this conflict as, I mean, their response was though very formal and principled. They're looking at this US operation as a blatant use of force. They're looking at it as a US hegemonic act. They are reiterating the fact that US seems to have renewed the Monroe Doctrine. They are talking about how can US ever be the guarantor of UN Charter if US continues to flout the basic rules. But brings into question again that China is trying to pit this image of the United States against its own principle of non-interference. But we need to really look beyond the words and see when China, has a certain stance and show of power in South China Sea or East China Sea. Is that not a show of? Is that a show of non-interference really? What's happening in Taiwan? Do we really count that as a show of non-interference or as the behavior of a good neighbor either? So that's for China. For Russia, Russia's concerns are very, very different. When it comes to Venezuela, Russia saw Venezuela as one of those, strategic partners wherein Russia did have some sort of an influence because in the wider Latin America, it doesn't seem that way anymore. For Russia, it's a loss of a key military ally. It's a loss of a key strategic partner in the Western Hemisphere, and its partners in the Western Hemisphere have been, lessening even more so since the Ukraine conflict. So
Yes.
Russia's rhetoric on US use of force is very pointed towards the fact that Maduro and his wife were kidnapped. And he's trying to equate, they're trying to equate that with the idea of modern day piracy or neo-colonialism, but they don't seem to really be addressing the fact that, US and international law are somewhere not on the same page, because then Russia would have to answer to what its own actions are in Ukraine when it comes to international law. So I'm seeing both China and Russia in this case being on the same page when it comes to condemning US operation in Venezuela, but for very different reasons and with very different words.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. Indeed, interesting timing now that we live in. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Asta Chadha for joining us today and sharing that insight from Japan. Now we move on to our next news. According to U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, nearly 200 U.S. forces were on the ground in Caracas during the operation to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Hexas said the mission targeted Maduro, who is wanted by the U.S. authorities, and was carried out without a single American casualty. Hexas has also mocked Russian air defenses, saying they failed to stop the operation. President Trump has confirmed Maduro and his wife are now in U.S. custody after arriving in New York on Saturday night. Both pleaded not guilty on Monday to federal drug and gun charges. Now we welcome Ms. Shruti Das Gupta. She's a foreign affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Das Gupta, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, what political message is U.S. Pete Hegseth sending by publicly highlighting this scale success and also the absence of casualties and the failure of Russian air defenses? What's your analysis? Can you say that they have succeeded because now that Maduro is gone, the same parties, another leader has taken oath as an interim government? So what's your analysis?
Well, there are two things that I can think of when they try and show their military might. One is that they want to sell more equipment, and the arms Pentagon lobby is trying to showcase the capture of Maduro and his wife from his own national capital to and taken to USA in Washington. It shows that US military is strong because the equipment is also strong. They are mocking Russian equipment because they want to get more defense contracts, which are not headed their way. Ever since Operation Sindoor in India showcased that the indigenous development based on Russian technology can deliver really, really astonishing results. So they want to get their share of the arms purchases that are happening around the world. And this is a very, very convenient way of showcasing that look how big the might of the military is in USA, and that we are still very, very strong. And we can, stand very tall in nations that are not even ours. And two is that our equipment is superior to anybody else's. Our technology still drives the world, and so come buy from us. Both these points are being showcased when they try and highlight exactly how they did this entire operation. Although I might want to add in this particular instance that the military violated the norms of USA itself, because the military is not supposed to move until unless a Congress approval is given, even under the emergency powers that Trump keeps citing and using forever since he's gained the throne of USA. So as the uncrowned king of USA, he has been citing emergency powers to execute a number of things, starting from tariffs to currently the capture of Maduro. Even then, in those emergency powers, the Article 2 requires for congressional approval of use of military might in any operation. And they were very, very categorical when they said that they did not inform the Congress, because the Congress has a tendency of leaking things. That's what they call their own elected lawmakers, leaks in their own system. So they are violating their own law. The military that did this operation obeyed their commander-in-chief, obviously, but they were also in violation of the United States law. The commanders cannot be held responsible, neither can the Delta Force, but the people who gave the command should be held responsible by the people of USA, because if you condone this once, it's going to happen again and again and again. He's already challenging Colombia. He's talking about how he killed Cubans. That's what they have said, that there are a lot of Cubans died who were protecting Maduro. So you're admitting that your army went into another nation and caused casualties. There is a larger conversation that is happening in all the boasting that Trump and his regime is doing. They're flaunting international law and rubbing your face into it, because the UN Security Council, although they've held a very, very polite meeting, and all of them have said that they condemn this act and want to stand with the people of Venezuela, are still unable to bring down sanctions on the head of USA, or any form of economic or political cost is going to be paid by USA for these actions, which are completely against the rules-based order. So they are trying to sell their equipment and showcasing their military might, and there's nothing the entire world is about to do about it.
Right. So what could be now potential regional and international consequences of this openly deploying U.S. ground forces to capture a sitting president, and do you think anybody is able to enforce the international law over to U.S. right now?
Not really, not in the Western Hemisphere, which is where the Monroe Doctrine, or the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine, that is now being enacted by the use of military force in the Western Hemisphere of the world, is going to be, nobody is going to be able to challenge it. Now think about it, what has he done after that? He's boasted about it. He's been very happy and very happy actually, about being able to use military personnel without any form of control from the Congress or even his own Republican Party people. It is just that one man and his coterie of a select few who decide which nation, which government is supposed to fall, and which nation, which government is going to be taxed. And the rest of the state machinery just justifies his actions. They are unable to counter it, they are unable to question him, and he's, as I've said before, the uncrowned king of USA as of now. Till the time the 2026 midterm elections are held and some power is shifted away from the Republicans to Democrats, although they are no friend of the world either, but at least there will be some measure of control, because at least the bills will not pass even after the acts are done. So there is going to be no control. He has a large amount of powers at his fingertips, and he's very blasé about using them. According to the region, let's look at it. Cuba has been threatened, Colombia has been threatened, and they should feel scared because they are the actual ones indicted in the UN report for the drugs cultivation and trafficking. Venezuela was just minerals and resources and oil that was just too tempting enough for Trump to ignore. And these nations are actually guilty of allowing drug cartels to function right under the state machinery. So they should be scared. They are scared already. The Colombian president has gone and said, "Come and get me." He's already taunting Trump. Greenland is already feeling scared. And Greenland, mind you, comes under the aegis protection of Denmark, which is a founding NATO member. So a NATO member state, because of Denmark, Greenland is also afforded the NATO protection, and Greenland already hosts a US site, a military site, which helps in protection of USA. Early detection of missile systems is already appointed there, yet still Trump is coming after it. It's coming after it because of natural gas, because of lithium resources. 27% of the world's lithium is supposed to be there, which is very critical for fighter jet technology. So Greenland is feeling threatened. You can understand that this is not going to stop with Venezuela. If you think this was a singular operation, it is not. This is a tariff game, only weaponized. You thought the tariffs were only coming for a select few. You thought he could be traded down. You thought you could stare him in the face and then smile and say, okay, fine, let's find a common ground and things will be okay. No, they're not. They're not okay. They will never be okay unless US is made to pay a cost for this particular kind of action. He is going to come after another nation and another nation. The nations that want to protect their internal security, they will then try and find the best possible deal that Trump can offer to them in terms of economic policies, and USA is going to benefit from that, and at least the government of that particular country will not face hostile takeovers like Maduro faced. Nobody in the world is in favor of Maduro and his regime, but nobody should be favoring the way USA took over that nation. But yes, that is exactly what is going to happen in the future in this particular region.
Yes. Thank you for highlighting that. Ms. Dasgupta, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next news as well. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Fredrik Nielsen has called for renewed talks with the United States after President Donald Trump once again suggested annexing the Arctic territory. Nielsen has said that there is no threat of the U.S. conquering Greenland and urged people not to panic. He has emphasized the need to restore the strong cooperation Greenland once had with Washington and said his government will work to re-establish contact with U.S. officials. Nielsen's comments come amid rising tensions over Greenland's rich mineral resources, which have drawn interest from multiple global powers. The Prime Minister has stressed that diplomacy and dialogue are the best ways to handle this situation, signaling that Greenland wants to maintain a peaceful relationship with the United States. Now we welcome back Ms. Shruti Dasgupta from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Dasgupta, for staying with us. Now, as you were just highlighting, that Greenland also feels threatened, and although they should be looking for common ground, what could be the common ground? What could be the card that Greenland could play with US so that US doesn't do what it did to Venezuela?
Well, very simply, as I just said, people will be scampering to give deals to Trump so that they don't take over their internal politics. And that's exactly what Greenland is also going to do: offer up resources, offer up places to set up military base, offer up places where they can, at dirt cheap rates, take away the resources of the nations, as long as the people get to hold on to the political power of their nation. They are going to take on the smaller loss of resources in face of the larger loss of sovereignty. So these are the things that are going to be in power in future for these nations, not just Greenland but the others as well. They want to talk it over, because imagine having a NATO secured nation being subjected to military show of force like Venezuela was. That will just simply crash the entire NATO alliance. So the European leaders want a dialogue-based, decision to come forth rather than a military-forced coup. And Trump knows this, and that's why he's already issued a deadline that we'll talk about it in 20 days, or we'll find a solution to Greenland in 2 months. These are his two particular timelines that he has offered. So in 20 days' time, you will see that there is some conversation about how Greenland is sitting down for a free trade agreement, or has agreed to set up military base, or some special military act is going to be passed for them. And in 2 months' time, US is going to be benefiting from this very show of power in Venezuela. And they're going to get away with a whole lot more and enforce a doctrine that is very, very hegemonical and imperialistic in its view.
With that, I would like to thank Ms. Shruti Dasgupta for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he has appointed Canada's former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland as his economic development advisor, citing her experience in attracting investment. Freeland, who has Ukrainian ancestry, served as Canada's Deputy Prime Minister between 2019 and 2024 and was a leading international advocate for sending aid to Kyiv. She is still a lawmaker in the National Parliament, but said she would step down in the coming weeks. She also said that she would quit her role as Ottawa's Special Envoy to Ukraine, a post she only took up last September. Her departure as a legislator means Prime Minister Mark Carney must call a special election to replace her. That's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.